Welcome to another edition of Labor Vision Podcast. I'm your host, James Dennis. America Workers First and Labor Vision presents the 2020 Vision for Labor. The goal is to engage, energize, and educate each and every one of you as you look at our podcast, listen to our podcast, like, share, subscribe to our podcast, our YouTube, all the stuff that we have. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm with my great co-host, Charles Daniels, president of CWA 4123, which is Communications Workers of America. Charles, what's happening today?
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me back again. I'm excited. We have a great guest today. I had an opportunity to sit down and talk with him recently and just could not have been more impressed with what he said. I think this is going to be a really educational piece.
Cool. Who we got?
Oh, we have Mr. Eli Savit, who is running for the Washtenaw County Prosecutor 2020. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. So I think it would be best if you could just kind of introduce yourself to the audience, explain why you're running, your past history, and why you're looking to put yourself through this.
Right. So my name is my name is Eli Savit. I'm running for prosecuting attorney out in Washtenaw County. I was born and raised there. Graduated from Ann Arbor Pioneer High School back in 2001. I started my career actually as an 8th grade U.S. history teacher in public schools out in New York City. Randy Weingarten was actually my local head at the time.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
That's Jimmy's dream job. He wanted to be a teacher.
Yes. I think that's a great job.
Well, and it remains probably the most rewarding day-to-day job I've ever had. I love teaching history to 8th graders. They're just at a point developmentally where they're starting to, come into their own and struggle with these sort of moral issues that pop up throughout American history. So it was a fantastic job. And, I was able to make ends meet in New York City as a young person because of the great contract that was negotiated through the union there.
And you lived in one of the great cities of New York City. I mean, that had to be pretty cool.
It was a lot of fun. I came back. I went to the University of Michigan Law School, started my career in private practice. I was a appellate and Supreme Court litigator. Among other things, I represented victims of domestic violence and spousal abuse who were seeking asylum in this country, victims of consumer fraud, criminal defendants, and kids that had special needs and were trying to vindicate their right to a appropriate education. After that, I had the tremendous opportunity to work for Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the United States Supreme Court.
Wow.
So
yes.
cool.
Let's give her some applause. Yeah,
She's
absolutely.
a gangster. Love her.
She is.
And may she live forever.
Exactly. And after that, that's a 1-year gig, and I decided that I wanted to come home. I didn't want to be a D.C. lawyer. I wanted to come back to Michigan, where I was born and raised, and so I put down roots back in Ann Arbor in Washtenaw County, my hometown, and I actually took a job as the senior legal counsel for the city of Detroit. I actually got into that because if you recall, it was 2016, and Mayor Duggan in Detroit was in a pitched battle with Betsy DeVos over the future of the Detroit schools, and I started helping the mayor and his staff sort of on the side, pro bono work to fight against Betsy DeVos and her vision for Detroit schools, and that led to a job offer to come on board as his senior legal counsel. And in that capacity, I do a number of things. One of the things that I'm most proud of is I lead our criminal justice reform work. We've been working with legislators up in Lansing to make people eligible for expungement in much greater numbers here in the state of Michigan, which allows folks to, remove old criminal records from their history and get jobs and get housing and continue their education. I also lead our public interest litigation program. So among other things, I oversee a portfolio of cases, thousands of cases where we're suing banks and slumlords who have maintained properties in dilapidated conditions unlawfully in the city of Detroit. We're suing the opioid industry for the damage that they have caused to the city and to this state. And we are actively involved in the right to literacy lawsuit, alleging that through years of state disinvestment and emergency management in the city of Detroit, Detroit school children have been denied their constitutional right to literacy under the U.S. Constitution. So I'm doing all of that and living out in Washtenaw County, and I decided to run for prosecutor.
In your free time.
In my free time.
Yeah, that's what I was getting ready to say, dude.
Yeah.
You are accomplishing
You
a
didn't have
lot,
a
which
full
is
enough
good.
plate,
Yeah, which is good. Which is a
Yeah.
good thing. So thank you.
well, thanks. I tried. Don't get as much sleep as I probably should, but you know, everything's fun. But I decided to run for prosecutor because I see our criminal justice system as being fundamentally broken. We have a two-track system of justice in this country. It's reflected in my home county of Washtenaw, which breaks my heart. You see folks that are of lower socioeconomic status being treated tremendously harshly simply for what in many cases amounts to a crime of poverty. You know, you get a criminal record because you're driving with a suspended license because you couldn't afford to pay your traffic tickets. And then that cascades, and you've got the court fees and the costs, and you might ultimately end up losing your job, losing your housing, and that has effects on families and on kids. We have severe racial disparities. In Washtenaw County, which you guys know prides itself on being one of the most progressive counties in the state of Michigan, we have some of the worst racial disparities in the state. In our juvenile justice system, 70% of the kids are black. And black people make up just 12% of Washtenaw County's population.
Did you say 70%?
I said 70%.
In a population of...
Exactly.
12%. Okay.
And at the same time, and this is in some ways to me an even more staggering number. In Washtenaw County, you are 8.5 times more likely to be held pre-trial because you can't afford your cash bail, which I could talk about a little bit more. But you can't afford your cash bail. This is before you've been convicted of anything. 8.5 times more likely to be held pre-trial simply because you can't afford to buy your way out if you are black than if you are white in Washtenaw County.
Wow.
That is a staggering discrepancy. If you told me it was 3 times as high, I'd say that was a staggering discrepancy. And it's not just me saying that. That is the highest racial discrepancy of any county that's been surveyed in the state of Michigan. So I'm running to change that. I'm running to eliminate the two-track system of justice that we have in Washtenaw County and that we've had in this country for way too long, in which we criminalize poverty, in which we're shuffling kids through the school-to-prison pipeline in and out of the justice system, which disrupts their lives, ultimately doesn't make us any safer because it, in fact, makes them more likely to commit crimes when they are out, when at the same time, we are letting corporations and employers who engage in wage theft, who steal money from their workers, we let them off the hook while the brunt of the criminal justice system falls on people that are working class, are poorer, and are predominantly racial minorities. So I've got a 17-point plan. I started this race.
Trimmed it down, eh?
It was, what
did it start at?
The problem is it keeps
100.
expanding. It started as a 12-point plan, but then
went to 17 from 12?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
When I declared in May, it started as a 12-point plan, and then I kept talking to people, kept hearing stories about what was wrong with our justice system in Washtenaw County, looked across the country and have talked to thought leaders across the country about how we can engage in real systemic criminal justice reform, and so it expanded to 17. But the 3 main pillars of my candidacy are, number 1, we need to promote rehabilitation and treatment over incarceration wherever possible. If somebody is dealing with an addiction issue, somebody is dealing with mental health, if you have a veteran coming into the system who's dealing with PTSD or trauma, those are fundamentally health issues. They are not justice issues. And we don't treat health issues at any other point in our system by throwing people into jail or into prison. If you had a broken leg, we wouldn't say go to jail and let's hope you get better. And it is the same thing for mental health, for addiction, for trauma. We have a 70% recidivism rate in Washtenaw County, close to a 70% recidivism rate, which means that nearly 7 out of 10 times people are going into the justice system, they're going to jail, they're going to prison, they're coming right back out, and they're committing more crimes, which means that we are not correcting. The correction system is not correcting. At the same time, 80% of the people in the criminal justice system in Washtenaw County are dealing with some underlying form of substance abuse. So you just take those 2 stats together, and it demonstrates that we're doing something wrong by not addressing that root cause of behavior and getting people better. It's not keeping us safer, it's not rehabilitating people, and it's ultimately costing us all money because we spend $40,000 a year plus locking people up in prison in the state of Michigan. A better investment would be to address that underlying issue, make sure that it's taken care of, and get somebody on the right track so they don't commit crimes again. So that's one prong. The other prong, as I mentioned, is rooting out and eliminating racial and socioeconomic inequity. One big part of that is I don't think you should be held pending trial simply because you can't afford to pay money out of your pocket. I think you should be held pending trial only if you pose a danger to the community or if you are a flight risk. So I'm an opponent of cash bail, and I've committed not to seeking it as prosecutor. We're going to seek to hold people if they pose a threat, but the same standards will apply to everybody, whether they're wealthy or whether they're not. Okay. And then the third thing is, and this comes back to my experience as a teacher, we need to treat kids like kids. Imposing adult sanctions on young people whose brains are still developing exacerbates the school to prison pipeline. It's counterproductive. Kids mess up. And when they do, it may be an opportunity to address the underlying trauma. It may be an opportunity to teach them. But we do no good sending kids into the juvenile justice system, taking them away from their families, taking them away from their schools, undermining the stability that they have for really not serious offenses. And we're going to stop doing that when I'm prosecutor.
Good point.
Amen.
Yes, good point.
You said a lot there, and you were on point with all of it. And I think the most important thing to acknowledge here is, number one, this isn't working.
Exactly.
You can't fix a problem if you turn a blind eye to it. And there's a lot of people out there that'll say that this is a slippery slope, and that once you start letting people get away with this and go to this, that all of a sudden it's going to devolve into chaos. So what do you say to the people that say this is you being soft on crime? The progressive agenda is too soft on crime, and it's going to lead to worse outcomes.
I'm not a tough on crime, and I'm not a soft on crime person. I'm a smart on crime person.
I like that.
And
that's cool.
You know, the numbers that I just mentioned, I think demonstrate that what we've been doing simply isn't working. If you think about the criminal justice system, the overarching goal is, yes, people make mistakes and there should be consequences attached to that. Fine. But when you have close to a 70% recidivism rate, when nearly 7 out of 10 times what you're doing is not causing somebody to get off that path that they've been on, and they're committing crimes again, that's not smart on crime, that's dumb on crime. Right. Because ultimately we're paying money, we're putting people in jail or in prison, and they're coming right back out and they're committing crimes again because, once again, we didn't address the underlying root cause of that, and it's not making us any safer. And in fact, in a lot of ways, it makes us less safe, because all the data will show you that sending somebody to jail or to prison is not rehabilitative. It's, in fact, criminogenic. It causes more crime, and you often see criminal behavior escalate the more times people go through the jail or prison system, and there's reasons for that. Number one, you take away their ability to get a job or to get housing when they have a criminal record, and the two biggest things that you can do to ensure that somebody doesn't commit a crime again are to get them a job and to get them housing.
Right.
Absolutely.
Stability.
Opportunity.
Right?
Yep, stability.
Number two, you know, and this is particularly true for young people. People my age, I'm 36 years old, people my age don't join gangs. They don't. It's a young person's pursuit, and that's because adolescent brains are hardwired to seek social connection. That's just where they are developmentally. So when you take kids away from their family, their support system, and you put them in a juvenile detention center with other kids that have been justice involved, there are gangs there that exist. There are gangs there that form because that's where they're at developmentally. They're going to naturally seek those out, and then they come out on the other side, and that's where you have a much bigger problem. So you might have a kid going in there, and I'll tell you a story. I had a young woman reach out to me, and she said the first time my brother went into the criminal justice system was when he was 11 years old, and he went to the juvenile detention center because he ran away from home. And ever since then, he hasn't spent a birthday with his family at home since he was 13. He's been in and out of the juvenile system. He's been in and out of the adult court system. And it's because sending a kid there when you're 11 years old, that oftentimes leads them to make these social connections and make friendships and join gangs with people that ultimately are going to encourage that person to engage in more criminal behavior. A much better outcome for an 11-year-old is to say, you ran away from home. there's some trauma there. We need to wrap our arms around you and get to the bottom of it.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense just to punish. And so on the tough on crime, soft on crime thing, it's just not working. The statistics bear it out. The science bears it out. We need a different approach, and that's what I'm running to bring.
To be smart on crime.
Exactly.
Great. Now, are you who are you running against?
So it is an open seat for the first time in 28 years. I actually did not anticipate it was going to be an open seat. I intended to challenge the current county prosecutor who's presided over a lot of these outcomes, but he decided to retire after 28 years. So now it's an open seat. I've got two opponents, one of whom is a sort of veteran of the current prosecutor's office and represents sort of continuity there. And the other of whom is, sort of longtime criminal defense attorney who's running on a little bit less of a progressive platform than I am. He's says he doesn't major in reform, and I forthrightly major in reform. So those are my two opponents in this race.
So this should be a hopefully a simpler race, right?
Well, as a candidate, you never think that the race is simple, and certainly we're working hard, but we've gotten a lot of support in the community. It's energized a community conversation around our criminal justice system, which I think is long overdue. And when people hear these outcomes, when people hear about these disparities, they really are often shocked, because the criminal justice system operates in the background for a lot of people. If you're not justice involved, if you haven't been a victim, you don't know exactly what goes on there. It's not like a congressional race or a state house race where people sort of know what folks are doing. But when they hear about this, when they hear about the outcomes, when they hear how much money they're paying, people actually are really outraged. And so I think it's time to turn the page on a lot of these policies, and I think we've got a great chance of doing so. The support so far has really been overwhelming, and I'm proud to have it.
So you know what? Once you get elected, what is one of the first things you're going to zero in on?
Yeah, so I'm asked that question a lot, and my first act as prosecutor is going to be I am going to get rid of some of the zero tolerance policies that we have in the current prosecutor's office. And zero tolerance policies, it comes out of this tough on crime approach. They look really great on a bumper sticker because everybody wants to feel safe, and there's certain categories of crimes that you want to say we're going to go hard after.
Right.
So I'll give you an example. The current prosecutor's office has a zero tolerance approach for gun crimes. And that sounds good because gun crimes are often serious. Sure. Nobody wants to be shot. Yeah. Well,
they're violent.
Sometimes they are and sometimes they're not.
Yeah, but the initial sound of a gun crime is violent. Now when you say that to me, hey, we got gun crime here. Oh,
it's easy optics.
Right.
Yeah,
so it sounds good. And everybody wants crime that is actually based in gun violence to be treated seriously. But when you have a zero tolerance for gun crime approach, it sweeps in a lot of errors that somebody can make that are really just human forgetfulness errors. And I'll give you an example. There was a Michigan Department of Corrections officer, lived in Washtenaw County, worked over at the Jackson prison. And he had two cars. One car, he would drive to and from the prison grounds. It was his sort of at-home car. And then he had a car that he kept on prison grounds, and he would drive around to the various buildings there. And in that car, he had his service gun, right? Which totally allowed to have. He's an MDOC officer. Everything was kosher there. Now, one day his at-home car was in the shop. And so he drove his prison car off prison grounds, which he's allowed to do, right? Because that's his only mode of transportation to get back home. He forgot, because of all the stuff that was going on that day, to take the gun out of his car. And he gets pulled over for, I think it was speeding in Washtenaw County on his way back home. And he does everything right. The officer comes up and he says, "Officer, I'm a Michigan Department of Corrections officer. I do want you to know that I have my service gun in this car. It's the car that I use on prison grounds. And so I want you to know that there's a gun in this car." And the officer says, "Okay, but look, you're not allowed to have that gun because it's not licensed to be carried off prison property." At the place where he was. But this was just
honest mistake,
error of forgetfulness. This is not what we think about when we think about gun crimes.
Right, it's not.
This is one of the good guys.
Exactly. A hardworking guy supporting his family, a law enforcement officer. So this goes to the county prosecutor's office, and they've got a zero tolerance policy, and there's no exceptions. And so he's charged with a felony.
You got to be joking.
I am not joking. I wish I was. He didn't go to prison because nobody's going to send this person to prison, but you can't have a felony and work at the Michigan
And
Department
he
of
told
Corrections.
them,
Total disruption of his life
Right.
for just one mistake.
For one mistake that wasn't violence, this is somebody that did everything right other than make a simple human error of forgetfulness. It doesn't make sense to deny that person their job, to deprive them of the opportunity to provide for their family because they made one mistake. There is a human story at the center of each and every criminal case, and zero tolerance policies undermine our ability to take stock of that individual human experience. So day one, 12:01 p.m. on January 1st, 2021, those zero tolerance policies are gone. We're going to treat every single case with the individual attention that it deserves and make a decision in the interest of justice.
see, that's what I'm talking about.
So with a zero tolerance policy, it's really a lazy policy. But you have these people in these positions that have gone to school, that have so much experience in order to better their judgment, these judges that are sitting there, and then you take away their ability to use that judgment to benefit the community. It makes no sense whatsoever. I get the purpose, but you can look at the aggregate data and the outcome that has transpired because of it, and the negative impact, it should be apparent. And when you see those bad things, it takes us so long to course correct, and it makes no sense to me whatsoever. You have to be progressive in your thinking, because that's just incremental progress. And the word reform is so important because that's the key. You're trying to fix the issue because we have a problem. And if you're just sitting around, telling everyone to, let them eat cake, everything's fine, you're part of the problem. We have to stop being part of the problem.
But you know what? The bad part is this. You realize that, let's just say that guy got pulled over for the ticket. I'm just being devil's advocate here. Let's say he never said anything about the piece being in the gun. The gun being in the car. And they just gave him his ticket and he drove off. And he should have. He should have. He actually did the right thing, and the right thing caused him a felony. That's where I'm going with this.
Right.
Had he just been I know this is a felony, I'm just going to be quiet and be wrong, he would have still had his job. He wouldn't have been through none of the inconvenience. So that just proves that what you're trying to push through here, God bless you. Let's make it do what it do. Now, I do have a question for you before we get out of here, because this time has clicked by so fast. It really
Great
has.
guest.
So, yeah, you have been a great guest. So, what is your 2020 vision for labor?
Yeah, so, look, prosperity in this country was built on the deal that we've given American workers, that if you go to work, you work hard, you will be entitled to fair pay, to good benefits, and the right to negotiate fairly through a union with your employer. This is something that is important to my family. My grandfather was the son of Jewish immigrants who fled Eastern Europe, fleeing anti-Semitic violence, came to this country penniless. And he had a job as throughout his career as a Chicago public schools teacher, which was, the epicenter of the teachers union movement. And because of that job, he was able to provide for a family, build a middle-class lifestyle, raise my father and his sister, and put them on a track to success. I started my own career as a U.S. history teacher in the public schools, and the union contract that we had there allowed me as a young person the opportunity to make ends meet and to serve my children that I saw in the classroom every day. We saw this with the GM strike here in Michigan. I stood on the picket lines and I talked to workers and supported them, and all they wanted was to work hard, to get fair pay, good benefits, and to share in the record profits that their employer was making, whose value they created. And we got some great outcomes out of that strike, and I think it really demonstrated the power of a union. But look, that social bargain is under attack right now, and 2020 is a pivotal year for it. It's a pivotal year for so much, but it's a pivotal year for labor. So my hopeful vision for 2020 is we will elect prosecutors and local officials who treat things like wage theft, like misclassification, like workforce or workplace safety violations with the seriousness that it deserves, and stand up for workers, not just for corporations. We will, at the state house level, elect people who will repeal our shameful right to work for less law in this state. And at the federal level, we will elect a president who doesn't just pay rhetorical lip service to workers, but actually stands for them. And by the way, appoints judges and justices to the federal bench that will do the same. The most shameful decision, I think, out of the United States Supreme Court in recent years was the Janus versus AFSCME decision, which overturned decades of precedent and incorporated a right to work for less principle in the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. It was totally unmoored from any previous legal reasoning. It harms unions, harms workers, undermines this social contract that has built American prosperity. We need a president and we need elected officials that are not going to stand for that anymore. And 2020 is the year that we can turn the page and reinstate this strong social contract that has allowed America and American workers to thrive.
Preach. Jimmy, before you go, I got two things though that I have to ask. I know the time has gone by faster and there's a lot to unpack, but I don't want you to go without addressing two things. You had mentioned the opioid crisis. So you're looking at Purdue Pharma right there, the makers of OxyContin. It's in 2000, they went before Congress and said this is a highly addictive drug, but they still were able to mass produce it, create an epidemic nationwide, hundreds of thousands of lives lost. But you look at those people, the Sackler family, where they're offshoring their money, where they've declared bankruptcy, where they're really avoiding the law. How is it that these corporations are able to get away with this white collar crime where someone else, where does that come from? Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, look, that is Exhibit A in the two-track system of justice that we have in this country. You talk about, and the president talks about getting tough on drug dealers, right? And often those are poor, predominantly minority people. Some of them are just folks that are dealing with addiction and are selling because they have a debilitating health crisis and it's fueling their addiction. They need help. But the biggest drug dealers in the country, the ones that have caused untold pain and misery and death, sit up in fancy corporate offices in New York City. They wear nice clothes. They're white. And they are able to avoid criminal and for a long time even civil consequences, which we're changing through these lawsuits, simply because of who they are, and they operate behind the veneer of respectability. The Sackler family, Purdue, the opioid industry, they knew exactly what they were doing. They are responsible for more deaths and more suffering than any street-level dealer or any, foreign street-level cartel, and they need to be held accountable for that. Eliminating the two-track system of justice means stopping the systemic criminalization of poverty, but it also means holding wealthy people and corporations that trade in human pain and suffering and do so intentionally, holding them to account as well.
So is it difficult because the money the resources that you have to use to try to pursue the white collar crime is so much more than the blue collar crime?
Yeah, and so let's look at this at a sort of local level with the county prosecutor's office. Our current county prosecutor has systemically turned down cases where the evidence was overwhelming that an employer engaged in wage theft. At the same time, he's been more than happy to prosecute employees for time card theft, right, for falsifying time cards. And I think the reason for that is exactly what you said. If you are a corporation or if you are, a wealthy person, you have resources and you are going to be able to buy good defense counsel. You're not probably going to plead down to anything because your defense counsel is going to advise against it. And they are tough cases to win because, on the other side, there's good lawyers and good lawyers can get acquittals for their clients. That's right. But to me, it's inexcusable to simply say, oh, this is going to be a tough case to win, so we're not going to bring it. And especially in the wage theft context, because think about what that does. That sends a message that if you are wealthy, if you are powerful, if you can afford good defense counsel, not only might you get off in front of a jury, but the prosecutor's office isn't even going to try. You basically have immunity for all the misdeeds you've done and taking money out of your workers' pockets. I think that's the wrong approach. I think, look, you might lose some of these cases because good lawyers on the other side can win cases. Sure. That's just the fact of the matter. But you need to try, you need to send a message that the prosecutor's office takes this stuff seriously. Only then will you actually deter this conduct and make sure that workers and ordinary people are protected.
Yes, 100%. You have these corporations they're really taking from the poor to enrich themselves. It's the reverse Robin Hood effect. It's corporate hoods robbing. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about, because we talked about an article that I'd read recently about a lot of people accept plea bargains even when they're not guilty. Could you explain why that happens?
Yes, and this is actually a great question, because a lot of people say, well, why would somebody confess to a crime that they
On the
didn't
surface,
do?
it makes no sense whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah, on the surface. But
think about the position that you're in. You're arrested. Let's say you're a young person. You're arrested for a crime. You're accused of it. And the prosecutor sits across the table from you. And you have been in jail, maybe because you can't afford your cash bail, for days, weeks, months.
Right.
You've been away from your family, away from your job, right? And your life is falling apart. And the prosecutor comes to you, and what they'll often say is, look, we'll let you off with, say 2 years in prison, or sometimes even time served. You'll get a felony conviction, but we're not going to seek any additional jail or prison time if you just plead guilty to this.
Right.
And because of the situation that you're in, that sounds pretty good. It's a logical decision, especially because the prosecutors then will often say, and if you don't, we are going to stack up a bunch of charges against you. Right, we're going to bring an aggravator that carries a 15-year sentence, or we're going to bring all these other charges that we think arise out of the same incident, even if the prosecutor knows at the end of the day they couldn't prove those up at trial. So It's coercive. And if you're a person that's sitting in jail for 2 months, say, because you couldn't afford to pay to get out, and a prosecutor comes to you and they say, you can take a year in prison, or you can take time served, or we're going to bring everything down on you. And you are going to spend 20, 25 years in prison away from your family, your job, everything that you've known. It's a logical choice in many situations to just say, okay, fine, I did it. I'll plead guilty. I just need to get out of here. I need to get back to my family and my life. I can't afford the risk of what this prosecutor is threatening me. So Look, I think plea bargaining has a place in the system, but I oppose coercive plea bargaining.
Yes.
Prosecutors should never be threatening to bring charges that they can't prove up beyond a reasonable doubt at trial. I think it's unethical. And then because I favor pretrial release as a norm unless you pose a threat to the community or are a flight risk, we remove from the equation the inherent coercion that results when one party across the negotiating table is sitting in jail and the other party is free. And this is really important, not just because a wrongful conviction is horrible for the person that was wrongfully convicted, but if you think about the other side of the equation, if we are wrongfully convicting somebody, that means there's somebody out there that really did it.
Yeah.
That remains free and continues to pose a threat to the community. The worst mistake a justice system can make is to wrongfully convict somebody of a crime. It's bad from a moral perspective. It's bad from a public safety perspective. And we need to engage in plea bargaining that doesn't encourage and facilitate those wrongful convictions.
And think of what that's doing to those people that are pleading guilty when they're going back to their communities after serving that time, and the stories they're telling, and they're all telling the same stories. There's a great line from Richard Pryor where he said, you go down to the courthouse looking for justice, and that's what you find, just us.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, that's that. Wow. Well, I tell you what, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Super informative.
Great informative. And again, something that people might want to know is plea bargaining isn't always the best way to go. And if you're innocent, you might want to rethink that. And a lot of times you're right. They're pushed up against the wall so hard that they're not going to rethink it. They're just like, I just need this to be over.
And when they're being held without bail, you're paying for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, all right, that's it. This is another edition of Labor Vision. America Workers First Labor Vision presents 2020 Vision for Labor. We are going to be released every Friday.
Yes, sir.
Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. And thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Peace.